My name's Tom Wilson. I'm president at Jack Russell Software. We do healthcare applications with web and mobile technologies, primarily AngularJS, and we've just started using Ionic. So today, what I'd like to do is go through sort of a quick intro of Ionic and try to do a demo, but I don't know, I might have to show a demo afterwards if anyone is interested, because my computer with the demo is not connected to the monitor. But anyway, we're here to talk about Ionic. It is a hybrid mobile application framework, and it's basically an alternative for web developers that are very familiar with web technology to build native applications or compile to native applications. It is a cross-compiler, so it sits on top of a tool called Cordova, which used to be called PhoneGap, and it's the core, and it basically creates a wrapper between the native code bindings and the phones and tablets and devices to a web view. And then your app is actually loaded into this web view. This enables you to create one application that can essentially be displayed on many different devices and platforms. The downsides of native is the proficiency required in each platform, the entirely separate code bases, and timely and expensive development, and then diminishing returns. So if a device goes out of style, then that code is no longer valid. So hybrid apps, they run on the HTML5 framework or platform, and they give you the ability to use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to create a very native-like experience. It's wrapped in Cordova, and then Cordova provides a way to connect to the API layers in the phone. So if you want to capture the camera or capture the geolocation or motion sensors, all of that can be handled through Cordova that's piped up to your application. And it's a very familiar web environment. Oftentimes you can pull your static websites and they'll just run in this platform. But, you know, a lot of people argued that, you know, web technology is not the best for mobile. And basically, this framework was built with the idea of using modern devices. So it sort of looks at iPhone 5 and up. It looks at Android really 4 and up. And it looks at Windows and Firefox OS. So it puts in techniques to make the web appear to be more native than ever before. So what do we need from a hybrid framework? Well, preferably an open source framework, which Ionic is, and we need to bridge the gap between web and native. Cordova helps us with that. Rich native UI components and interactions. Ionic provides that, very similar to Twitter Bootstrap, but for mobile. So it provides a whole CSS framework to use for your UI. And it integrates with a tool that you may be familiar with called AngularJS. AngularJS is a framework that is on the front end, and it's a MVC whatever or star framework that allows you to quickly build front-end single-page applications using JavaScript. And now with Ionic, you can interact with that as well. The Ionic framework is built by a team called Drifty, and they have created quite a community around this framework. If you look at their forums and the IRC, and then on GitHub, they have over 10,000 stars. So it's not just another temporary service. So Ionic leverages HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript, and then it is basically best friends with AngularJS. So a lot of the functionality, a lot of the application logic really is just AngularJS, and that was done intentionally to take advantage of the rich and powerful framework that AngularJS is. The other toolkit that they use to manage their CSS is a tool called Sass. And Sass is a pre-compiler for your CSS, and you can use that to quickly customize the CSS pieces that they have built in their framework. If you want to change colors, change fonts, all of that is very easy, and you can simply recompile it, and it's done. So Sass really makes CSS sane to manage. And you can see it a lot in responsive UI development and design. Now, the Ionic framework team is obsessed with performance, and performance is an interesting term. They really focus on leveraging the hardware to do accelerated animations, both using CSS3, and they're also working on a new JavaScript animation engine as well to make it even faster. And then they leverage Angular to provide minimal DOM manipulation. They actually create a plugin that makes the scrolling of lists very seamless. And they remove jQuery from their framework, but you can always include it. The Ionic framework, there are people that are using it just as web mobile, where you actually push your code onto a web server and then attach an icon to your phone and link from there. But they primarily built this with native focus in mind. They built this framework to run inside Cordova directly on the phone. So you will encounter issues if you try to do the web mobile approach, but the hybrid approach, it works very, very well. And they really focused on design. So they really focused on design from the standpoint of trying to make the CSS UI look very similar to a native type of experience. They've added a lot of smarts that have been pain points in the past, like dealing with no back button on iOS, a back button on the hardware of an Android. They built the framework smart enough to recognize each other, so if the back button on the Android is present, then not show the back on the header bar. But if it's not present for iOS, show the back. So they've added a lot of that. They've included fast click so that you don't have the click delay, and a lot of pain points that were previously uncovered with hybrid applications. They have a rich, iconic framework or library, and they have sort of three sort of groups of icons. They have generic icons, they have iOS-specific icons, and Android-specific icons. I think they're working on some of the Windows-specific icons as well. And, you know, they really made this framework to be as simple as possible. So if you're a web designer or web developer, this should look incredibly boring, right? So it should look like just basic HTML, and that basic HTML, they leverage Angular and they leverage CSS to make it look like a native list. And they've added some rich features that you may have seen in some smartphones recently, like the complex list and being able to hook in to a multi-button function on a list item with the slide left functionality. And again, your declarative code in Angular is very readable, very easy to follow what it's doing. So hopefully this is not looking very complicated. So one of the biggest issues with hybrid applications is the scrolling. Getting the scrolling to work very similar to what native uses. And the Ionic team built a directive, which is an Angular custom tag, and actually created a lot of the tricks or hacks you have to do to make your scrolling smooth. This allows you to put 100, 200,000 items in your array, and this collection repeat is smart enough just to display or render the ones that the user visibly needs on the DOM. So it makes it very easy to do pull to refresh, makes it very easy to load. We put in 5,000 drugs, and people are able to search them with just 3 letters, and there's no delay whatsoever. We actually had to add a forced delay because it was faster than they expected. Tabs, again, the tab framework is very simple, very declarative. It uses the AngularJS directives, and you have Ion tabs, and then each Ion tab custom HTML tag underneath that is a tab on the interface. And let's see if I can scroll this down. And right now, it puts the tabs at the bottom for all devices, but they are working on some of the smarts into the tab component for Windows phones, which puts the tabs at the top, and basically continuing to add to make it smarter based on what device it's running. There we go. One of the more popular things with iOS 6 was the side menu. And AngularJS wanted to, or Ionic really wanted to build a side menu widget when they started the framework. And that was the first widget that they actually produced. And this gives you the hamburger icon, and then you can just slide over and see your menu. And again, using AngularJS directives, you just specify side menus, and then your nav, and then your content. And it's very easy to follow. And they also implemented a slide box. And just recently, they implemented the Tinker animation. So it's like a deck of cards, and you can pull a card off, and it'll slide back. So they're constantly introducing more and more native like animations and components. And the action sheet. So again, with the action sheet, it actually uses an AngularJS service to include into your controller, and then you just simply tell it when to show and what buttons you want to appear, and map those to your JavaScript click events. So again, it's a little bit more complicated, a little bit more on the code side, but again, very easy to get your head around. And pull to refresh. So they really wanted to make pull to refresh very, very easy. And they used AngularJS directives. You just basically create the Ion refresher directive, and you say on refresh, and that's the method in your controller that will go and grab your data. And navigation. So that was really one of the biggest pain points with some previous hybrid frameworks, was dealing with navigation. With Ionic, each tab has its own navigation memory. So that way, when you switch between tabs and you go back, you will flow through its individual history stack, and creates a very native-like history process versus like the web's back button. So to get started with Ionic, there's a couple of requirements you need. You need npm, which is the Node package manager, and you can go to nodejs.org and install that. It works on any platform, and it helps pull down all the pieces for the Ionic framework to build. And the other pieces you need is obviously Cordova. And if you plan to run or build the frameworks on your system, you'll need Xcode and you'll need the Android SDK. But pretty much it's npm install Ionic, and I'll run down sort of an example of how to get started. It's not on this one. Let's see. We are. So let's try this. Just bear with me 1 second. Okay. Okay, this may be a little bit hard to read, but I'll try to make it as big as possible. View. Okay. Come on. Try again. Okay, let's try this. Okay. So really, to get started, it's pretty simple. Just do, let's see, npm. Let's see if it's installed. So let's do. So you would do npm install Ionic and Cordova and gulp. And gulp is a build tool in JavaScript, and we'll do a -G for global. And what that will do is install your tools. And once your tools are installed, you can start with a few different kits. One kit is the tab kit. So if you wanted to install the tab kit, you would go Ionic, Start, and the name of your app, and then you would say Tab. And if you wanted to install the side menu kit, you would just go in and type side menu. And what that would do is create a My App folder and then put everything you need inside that folder and actually build you a side menu out of the box, ready to go system. Let's see if I can example. Link. So, and let's see if I can make this work. Okay. CD workspace. Okay. So once you have Ionic installed, you'll have a list of directories. The main directory that you want to concentrate on is the www directory. And in that directory, you can see you can see that you'll have CSS, JavaScript, images, a lib, and templates. So it should look very, very similar to an AngularJS application. And I'll provide this for you on my slides after the talk. But let's see if we can run it. So once you have everything installed, you should be able to just run it by just doing Ionic serve, and that'll fire up an internal web server and serve the Ionic website on a particular port that I can't see. I think it's 8100. So. Okay, we'll try to demo that in a little bit. But the most important thing is that the license is MIT license, so it's free to use, even commercially. And it's community powered. Everything is on GitHub. File issues on GitHub, interact with the developers on GitHub. So it is very, very much a fast-moving project. It's currently in beta, but with AngularJS just released 1.3, and I believe Ionic is going to be releasing their version 1 in the near future, probably before the end of the year. So with that, I will love to show you guys a demo. So if you'd stop me, I'll be here all week. And right now, I'll be glad to take questions. Yes, sir. Sure. So the question is, I have an existing AngularJS application, and how could I leverage that code to use in an Ionic application? So if you install Ionic, you can easily use Bower or Git or whatever to share your directives and your services and everything in AngularJS. A great example to look at is an open source project called Habit RPG, and they share probably 70% of their code between their mobile products and their web app products, and it's all in AngularJS. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the story isn't as strong if you're doing a web-hosted app rather than packaging it as mobile. But that seems like a useful way to test in initial stages. Why is it complicated then?
They can't control some of the underpinnings to make it a very smooth native experience. So one issue or example is they use a Cordova plugin called Keyboard, and so any input text field is actually rewritten with native inputs, so you get full sort of native keyboard tactical experience. Whereas with the web mobile, you don't have the capability to interact with those device components, so you're going to have the experience of an HTML input element. And as you know, you can make it work. You just have to put a lot more time and effort than just to drop a tag on. And there's several little pieces like that. Yes, sir.
But up until iOS 8, I think the UI WebView was pretty crippled. Didn't have a JIT compiler, and I know that with that, they now have the WK WebView. Do you know if that's going to be a function that either Cordova or Ionic takes advantage of?
They are constantly trying to make that more seamless. Cordova in particular. So.
Right, because I'm just, just with the experience there, I didn't know if that was either on the Cordova side or Ionic side.
It's on the Cordova side.
Okay.
So Cordova creates the sandbox, and then Ionic sits on top. And Adobe is aware of those issues and are very interested in getting any of those issues resolved.
Do you know of any sort of equivalent effort on the Android side with regards to the WebView?
I know that the Chrome team has made several optimizations, like the Android 4.1 is night and day faster than like the 2 versions. So I know that they're very, very interested in staying on top of that as well.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Do they provide any strategies for dealing with out-of-service issues?
With out of service, sort of an offline type of support. Right. So the question is does Ionic provide any strategies for offline support? And actually, by leveraging AngularJS, they allow you to pick all kinds of offline tool services that integrate in AngularJS. One that we use is PouchDB, and PouchDB basically gives you like a mini CouchDB either in your web, or you can actually load it natively with Couchbase Lite on the actual device and interact, and then you have offline support. But you can do SQLite, you can do other things, and then they also have a toolkit called NG Cordova, and NG Cordova has about 20 to 30 plus plugins that are already in the Cordova suite, but they angularize them, so they're really easy to interact. So if you want to interact with the camera, it's as simple as telling the camera to show and then passing a promise and receive it. Same thing with local storage. So file support or any other local storage support the device has. Yes, sir.
What's the preferred approach for like testing your app, say for iPhone, like emulation or whatever? How does that?
Yes, so they work with Angular, so they have Karma and they have Protractor, which are testing tools in the Angular story. And then they also are working with Appium, where you can actually run your test in Sauce Labs on mobile devices and get feedback. And the last thing they're working on is the ability to connect while the app is on your device and run the test. But I don't think that's quite there yet. But Appium is probably your best bet. Yes, sir.
Speaking of connections, so when one use the HTTP or the Q objects for pulling down feeds or Ionic, in other words, in native you're going to use something like Volley on Android, I think it's AF framework or something.
Right.
What's the usual standard approach in Angular for hitting a feed, hitting a
Right.
service?
So Angular comes built in with an HTTP service, very similar to jQuery's AJAX, but it returns promises, so you can easily, any RESTful backend, you can use that and immediately hook into. Firebase is very easy to drop in and hook into. There's a couple of others that are more backend as a services that you can easily, anything you can do with a single page application, you should be able to do with Ionic. Yes, sir.
When I open the Ionic app, does it load every page dynamically, or is it preload everything?
It depends on how you position it. So anything you put into the head or your main script will load just like a web page. And the idea is don't use long distance URLs, use local URLs on the file system, so that package is all local. When you're using AngularJS, they have templates where you can break all your HTML in small little files. Those files can actually be loaded dynamically, so you don't have to load all of those HTML templates. They actually get loaded at the point the user navigates to that page or that URL. Exactly. Almost like running a static web server. I'm sorry? Yep. All right. Thank you very much for your time, and come by for questions. And I'll be happy to show you a demo.